Welcome back for the third season of the DDI podcast. Our mission here is simple. We're here to demystify the misconceptions surrounding the digital infrastructure sector. I'm Mark Yeeles. I'm the Vice President of our Secure Power Division here at Schneider Electric in the UK and Ireland. And I'm delighted to be joined by Mark Bjornsgaard, the CEO of Deep Green Technologies, a data center company that recaptures heat and repurposes it for good, all for free. So welcome, Mark, to the DGI podcast in our new and Fandango room here in deepest, darkest Kent.
Very happy to be here. Yeah, no, it's a great place.
Well, thanks for joining us. And before we get into Deep Green Technologies, I'm really always interested in where people have come from, how they started. Please tell us your story.
Do you want the truth or something beautiful?
I'm going to leave this bit to you, actually. I think.
The truth is a melee and a mishmash of work throughout. No formal career path. I started in the music business, and we built a business called Artists First, which did reasonably well, but that was a long time ago. And I'm a history and politics student, so I'm a troublemaker by trade. Fast forward sort of another 10 years ago, and we started to create a kind of thread around venture capital. So I built a small venture capital company. We accrued more and more sort of cash into our balance sheet, and we started to build businesses for large corporates when they were going to make a mess of it themselves. But we weren't doing what McKinsey and Bain were doing. We were doing it, in our view, properly. We owned the businesses. So, and that's where Deep Green came from. So we built the first versions of Deep Green in British Gas. And that business is still going. It's still called Heater. Chris, who runs it, is a good mate. He's actually been involved in a number of other businesses we've invested in. But 8 years ago, and we also own a care business with British Gas as well. So out of that sprint was a whole range of different businesses. But 8 years ago, when we announced that we could use computers to heat hot water for free, everyone, as I'm sort of fond of saying, we were right at the start of the kind of Gandhi cycle. It was either ignore them or belly laugh in their face, usually.
Okay.
So anyway, 3 years ago, we felt the time was right, and that's where we started to invest in the first version of what became the first Deep Green actual site. So my background is lots of different investments across a lot of different sectors, but ignorance is sometimes a superpower. You know, when you wander into a sector, we're not data center industry people, you can ask some really awkward, dumb questions, which usually most people in a sector are either avoiding answering themselves or pretending they don't need to. Hence why we're here.
Yeah. And tell me then, so Deep Green Technologies, you kind of alluded to it just then, actually, just around the heating water piece. And when I think about this, I think you've made a comment around repurposing for social good. Why is this so important to you?
So just to if anyone doesn't know what we do, we're building a network of small data centers where we will only recapture heat and give it away for free. Okay. So that's where we were anchored 8 years ago. The truth of the matter is, it was such a beautiful idea, I couldn't really ignore it. And when you explain it, and I think some of the visibility we've had suggests that's the case, that it is just so logical and so obvious that it was something that I couldn't really ignore. We've invested in heat batteries, we invested in electric cars, but this one was always the one. It was always the one that the kind of hill that I was going to kind of die on. But 8 years ago, as I said, it wasn't even close to viable. Even 3 years ago, spending a couple of million quid building a supercomputer in a leisure centre wasn't the most sensible deployment of capital.
Well, let me pick up on that piece then. So how did you make it happen? Sounds like you've got an idea, you've got some money, and then what?
Like most of life, it's luck, blind luck and persistence, really.
Okay.
You're just the last people standing. I think there's a brilliant Michael Lewis video of him talking to the Princeton alumni, and he's like, look, you're privileged middle class. Don't kid yourself that most of life is not just luck, or at least half of life is luck. So and then maybe the persistence comes first. So the persistence is, this is such a great idea, you can't drop it. So I guess persistence gets you to the stage where you overcome the fear of your partner and everyone else in the business spending couple of million quid on a supercomputer that you shouldn't be building. And then blind luck kicks in when you do it the day that Rishi Sunak announces that he needs a 3-phase power connection for his indoor swimming pool, and a whole bunch of pools had closed down, and the energy crisis. Well, we picked in a sort of good bad way. We picked our moment. We made sure that we launched it at the point where we thought the media might pick it up, but we didn't. Yeah, the 14th of March is a day last year that will kind of, my life changed. I went from never having done any public speaking to being on Radio 4 at 6 o'clock in the morning. And that terror is never going to
still lives with you today, right?
Going to leave me.
Yeah. And you're right. I think there was some discussion around laundrettes, swimming pools, anywhere that needs the heat. And so I can pick up the kind of passion coming through, but should we do more of this? Is there a market for us to really think about how do we deploy these applications in these areas?
Well, we're going to find out in the next 5 years with Octopus whether there's a market for it. We hope there is. I mean, one of the great things about doing what we're doing is we're building an Octopus data center, so there's sort of reassurance around the brand. But in terms of where we can do this and where this leads, that's what gets the pools are kind of the fun, easy bit. They're the visible bit. We dress up as lifeguards. We talk about pools because everyone can relate to a warm laptop and a public swimming pool that needs heat. But the reality of this is, or the bigger opportunity, if you like, is the electrification of heat. So heat pumps currently are economically a crazy decision. We've just had one installed in our house, and no one is going to get any brownie points for putting a heat pump in at the moment, whether we like to admit that or not. That's one of the kind of realities of it. But if you slave a heat pump to a data furnace, a deep green unit, you make that heat pump 3-4 times more efficient, and you make it economically viable. So where we'll go is pools, district heating, electrification of heat, so homes and offices. And then it gets really, really interesting when you start to give free heat away to local businesses and industries. You can start to imagine a whole wave of new types of industry coalescing around our local economies that have frankly never been there. So whether that's aquaculture, growing prawns and shrimps in containers, black larvae production so we can feed chickens and do it locally, and there's a whole bunch. 30% of the economy can be driven by data centers, which makes it such a big idea, I guess.
Yeah, and I think what you've done there great for us is really make it really easy for listeners to understand how this will impact or have a positive impact on the general public, right? Because it's a concrete bunker.
Yeah,
to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But what you're highlighting there is the way that we just need to think a bit more broadly around the ecosystem of a DC to make it more viable and more operationally acceptable for the general public.
Yeah, it's just one standard deviation away from the norm. We don't have to think too crazy. Actually, it's you talk to a laundrette, you talk to a laundry business, and they say 70% of my OPEX is heat, and you say I'm going to give you that for free, and they're like, what?
So
you're like, yeah, of course, because I'm richer. My PUE is 1.003. We are wealthier because we're giving you something for free. That's what's so extraordinary about the whole concept.
I think you just touched on something there as well, because there is a tech and a different way of thinking. You just described that beautifully for us in terms of certain applications. But when you think about how we need to broaden the general public's horizon on what the art of possible looks like, there's a bit of a job to do around PR, isn't there? What would be your either guidance, or what would you like to see done more of in terms of PR, so we can explain that this is possible, and the outcome could be that you could receive free something, heat, electric, whatever it is.
Again, more by luck than judgment. What we have inadvertently stumbled upon in Deep Green is that if you tell a very, very human story in a very, very geeky technical industry that no one really understands, it turns out that you can just short circuit everyone's brain chemistry. Immediately everyone understands it, but you have to tell the human story. We sort of see ourselves as sort of good outsiders, and I see a lot of people talking about technical stuff. Now, of course, that's important when we're talking between ourselves. We need to know whatever that generator is doing. But actually, to the outside world, we need to tell more human stories. And I think that's just, again, it's not that difficult. It's just a mind shift. It's just a mindset shift. The Daily Mail article a couple of days ago about the Google data center being built, huge furore about it. It's making our kids ill. It's an eyesore. It would have... The Daily Mail article, a picture is the massive land that's being developed for the data center, and then this huge housing estate next door. It's just like, it would not have been beyond the wit of man to do a dig for like literally 30 meters and say, guess what? Everyone on this housing estate now has got subsidized free heat. You'd have bought unlimited goodwill. You'd have bought way more coverage than it would have cost you to buy the heat exchanger and do the dig. And so, that's not a difficult win, is it?
I feel it's a quite simple win, to be quite honest. And maybe our counterparts in the Nordics have a better outlook and a better view on a number of the topics that you're kind of discussing and kind of giving us a headline on here. Just thinking about what you just said there, have you got maybe we can demystify a little bit right now and kind of just give our audience a view of maybe a couple of the applications you've worked on that could like break down those barriers. What would you see as kind of case studies, if you like, for listeners?
Well, we're starting in pools, so we've made this headline commitment that we're going to do 300 megawatts in 1,500 pools in 5 years. That is a heavy lift. Whoa. That's a lot. And Octopus are excited about that, and they're excited about spending all that, their many billions, doing that. What we've got in the pipeline, already gets super, super interesting. So district heating systems, there are actually plenty in the UK. 3% of our heating is already district heating systems, 11,000 already in the UK, various sizes. So there's plenty to go at in just doing what the Nordics do well. Just putting all of those combined heat and power plants, they're usually gas or sometimes even oil. They're all going to be ripped out by 2030. They're all going to be replaced by heat pumps. Of course, that's just where you put a data furnace and a heat pump. Mandated now by government regulation that they're not allowed to charge you. They've got to everyone who's running those systems has to reduce people's bills. If we're giving them the free heat, that has to come down. So that's a kind of a no-brainer. That keeps us occupied for at least another 10, 15 years.
Right.
And then there's just even on the next step, you don't have to get into kind of containerized shrimp production or all the kind of crazies. You just go to glass houses and greenhouses. Again, they've got combined heat and power. They're usually gas fired. They've all got to be decommissioned. But the trick with those is that they produce carbon dioxide that they then pump into the greenhouses. Turns out there's a new type of direct air capture, sorbent-based air capture, that only needs heat at about 70, 80 degrees, which again, the data furnace can supply. So, all of these kind of use cases coming in, they're all in our pipeline. They're all real. They're all now.
Yeah, no, I think I've personally been involved in a few of those case studies. I think in things like vertical farms is another great example.
Well, right.
Because the most expensive commodity for a vertical farm is the heat.
Yeah. Vertical farms, depending on what you're growing. If you're growing, we can geek out. We geek out on the. So if you're growing mushrooms, yes. Actually, interestingly, a lot of vertical farms need to get rid of the heat, but that's no bad thing because you then reverse the heat exchanger. So where anything needs cooling, it needs heat, and vice versa usually. So again, it's a kind of thinking a little bit creatively and a little bit more a bit more laterally around the problem, but the vast majority of cases, it's possible to land this stuff in, and then it's got all the benefits of the power being available now, and that's the key thing for us as an industry, right?
Well, I mean, maybe we're going to come on to talk about the national grid and John Pettigrew recently saying that with the dawn of AI, I mean we're in the early stages of it. You've got a six times supply. Demand going to grow 6 times. Yeah. There's 2 questions on my mind. One is, how are we going to solve it collectively? And maybe there's some immediate things we can be doing. But I'm more interested to hear, how are you adapting, or is there anything you're doing differently with the dawn of AI and this crunch on power? I think you've told a reasonable story up to now and how you're doing it. But is there anything different relating to that specific topic?
I mean, you'd expect somebody like me to say it, but if we genuinely need 6 times what we've currently got, so in the last 25 years, we've taken all the cheap, free, easy, available sites and power, right? Yep. So we now need 6 times the amount, while transport's trying to electrify, while heat's trying to electrify. The reality is the data center industry is never going to be able to access those electrons. You can disagree, but if you look at the data and the math of what's happening on the grid, there is just zero chance that the data center industry, as it's set up, is ever going to be able to expand. It's not going to be able to expand 1x, let alone 6x. Mm-hmm. And other people are saying 10, right? And that's in the next 10 years. After 10 years, exponential curves do what exponential curves do. They just keep going up. Yeah. So there's just, in our view, and there's a reason why Octopus invested us, there is just zero chance that if you don't come up with a completely new plan, the data center industry is just, it's going to flatline. What we're doing is saying, accept that reality. You know, an unsolvable problem isn't a problem, it's reality. Accept that reality and then build wherever you can, where there's heat reuse, and build behind the meter. So we can already land gigawatts of power across the country. And there's actually already 1.3 terawatts of electricity that's abated, that's just not used from North Sea, because we can't use it at peak times. We can use it at non-peak times, and we can fill batteries. So the whole view of Deep Green is that we were going to be running our sites more and more off grid. You have to accept that. I believe, and I think a lot of other people do now, is that you have to accept that reality. If you go for a 40 megawatt grid connection in Hertfordshire, next, good luck with that. I mean, not least because you're going to have Extinction Rebellion and Greenpeace at your door, and the Daily Mail. But the grid, there's just no power available. It just won't happen.
Yeah, and we've been talking off air, haven't we, about the geography of the UK and Ireland. Actually, we shouldn't forget Ireland in this, because they're probably 3 to 5 years ahead of us in terms of the crunch on energy and available energy. But we were talking about, well, that's now going to probably push us up into the northern region of the UK and beyond into Scotland, probably, to go and search for that energy in the short term. But the real term is short, medium, and then the longer term, right?
Yeah, exactly. The key here, though, in our view, again, is that it's not just about behind the meter. You've got to know what's going on in the software layers, and you've got to know what's going on in the network. If you put those 3 things together, then it makes sense. If you all photonics networks, so networks that are completely light-based, we can connect 2 sites together, and the cabinet in that site thinks that the cabinet in the other site is next door to it. That we've got an 800 gigabyte connection between them. There's more dark fiber in the ground in the UK than in the whole of North America. So once you get the networking right, and then you say, so you've got power, and then you've got network, and then you say, well, the software layers, they're actually optimizing very, very fast. So this whole idea of running a data center with a 10, 15% capacity, in the next 5 years, all of the software layers are going to change to the point where that kit's going to be on all the time. Yeah. Then you have a plan. Then you can say, well, I can go anywhere. And I don't need to be hung up on this old version 1 of the business. If you and I were sitting down now and planning a power station, and we said, good news, everyone, we're going to build a coal-fired power station in the middle of London, everyone would go, are you mad? Sorry? Go and build a wind farm or put some solar panels up. What we're doing in the traditional industry is building battery power stations, coal-fired power stations. It doesn't make sense. We don't need to do it.
And I think we've seen some, more recently, probably in the last year, 18 months, we've seen nuclear talked about quite a bit, SMR type technology. Yeah. So there is an ecosystem of solving agents here, isn't there? This is not one cap fits all, but there is a lot of work to do around this for sure, huh?
Of course. And look, even when you do the math, there's probably, 10, 15 gigawatts of available heat reuse sites in the UK. But that won't be enough. As you say, we'll need a blend of, because as everyone else is electrifying. But if we can't grow, if the data center industry can't grow, that's not just a brake on the economy. That's flatline, right?
Well, and I talk about this from the data center industry really is the 4th utility. Well, it's probably the first utility, if we're all honest, because none of
you could do without water
without it.
Exactly.
They work without it. So, look, let me bring you back to you mentioned it earlier. Octopus invested 200 million in your company. Now they're taking a strong market share, announced recently 22% market share in the UK. Exciting times. what does that money mean to you? What's that helps you? You mentioned exponential earlier, but I'm thinking it's got an exponential kicker for you. But how's it helped?
I think an Evening Standard journalist rang up the day we announced it and said, "Is this Mark Bjornsgaard? He's a billionaire." And it was like, no, he's not.
Is that how it works?
Yeah. People do them really fag packet math and think. Sadly, that's not the case. So 200 million is... so the Octopus brand is an incredible brand, and we had lots of people who wanted to fund us, but it was so obvious right from the beginning that they were the right people. They're very kind of calm, considered infrastructure, patient capital, but they sort of got the equity component as well. They also understood that 200 million is just kind of table stakes, right? That gets us... We'll hopefully get through 200 million in the next year or so. And then there's project finance, which will obviously organise around the Octopus funds. So yeah, of course, the money is useful, and you just can't do this without a vast amount of relative, cost-effective capital. Mm-hmm. But actually, it's the brand and the ecosystem that are almost more important. Going back to our point about solar and batteries and how we think we're solving this problem, the Octopus have ground source heat pumps, they have batteries, they have solar, and of course we could go and find partners in that, but actually having that mix in-house and being able to access their expertise is incredibly valuable. And then the brand itself, critical infrastructure is critical infrastructure. It's called critical, it's for that for a reason. It needs to be on. So we could spend 5-10 years developing a brand that was trusted and respected, but actually just saying Octopus is incredibly helpful to give people the reassurance that this is a proper, considered, grown-up play that's going to be around for the long term. So,
well, I'm excited to see what happens and how this progresses over a period of time. But I think recently you talked about data center capacity in London. The whole it's not in plain sight kind of thing. What did you mean by that? And what could we kind of copy paste what you're proposing into other areas as well?
That's kind of what I was alluding to before. So when you add up all the swimming pool, all the public pools, all the commercial pools, all the laundries, all the distilleries, all the hospitals, all the schools, all the existing district heating systems, that's about 1.4 gigawatts of power that is already, most of that wire is already in the ground. So you can land and then you can upgrade. So when we talk about that availability of power in an urban area, that is a kind of for instance that we use to illustrate this point around it. Yeah, it's hiding in plain sight. It's there if we get the networking and the sites right. And then of course you can extrapolate that across the UK and across Europe and across everywhere else in the world. So everywhere where there are, California's got rolling blackouts. We know Ireland's maxed out. 14% of the grid is now data centers. Anywhere where you've got this problem, you've got this solution that's there and ready to go.
It's fascinating, and I think we're going to see. I'm hoping we see more and more of this kind of level up thinking. It's because it's. I know we just said it maybe a couple of minutes ago, but it's one pod of a solving ecosystem. Yeah. I think, and I think there'll be more opportunity. You mentioned software. Yeah. I mean, that has such a big play on this. It's huge to optimize, right? You probably see this daily. Yeah,
huge. I mean, I'm no expert, but beyond Kubernetes, so we've kind of had mainframes, we've had VMware, then we had Kubernetes, and now we've got WebAssembly. And WebAssembly is this Rust, these associated kind of protocols and languages. It's effective. It is a zero trust environment, which basically means that you can run it anywhere and it can't be hacked. It's not possible to hack it. So we've got the Canadian government running space telescope data on Tesla GPUs and our kit via distributive, just to kind of prove the point. But this world is coming at us thick and fast. I mean, you got challenger banks who are now writing code, writing Rust code. It's very hard to write, but luckily the robots are there. So we've already got converters. You can just feed a certain type, whatever code you've got in it, it'll convert it into Rust. And once you've got zero trust environments, you can literally run code anywhere. Somebody's banking app can be running on that iPad. No problem. It's not, the containers are so small, and that is a fundamental shift. Not only because it means that all of the power is going to, in a data center, is going to be utilized all the time. It's so efficient. You're not going to have servers sitting there idle for 90% of the time. They're going to be on all the time.
You kind of give us a bit of a geek insight there.
Sorry, yeah.
If you don't want me saying it.
Yeah.
Hey, just one final point for us here then. So One message that you want to leave today with our listeners, what would that message be about the future and how we can think maybe slightly different compared to how we think today? What would that message be?
I mean, look, we're still making up as we go along, right? Everyone is. There's no sort of pontificating. What we talk about a lot is the right hand side of the exponential curve. I think a lot of us fret understandably about the climate emergency we're in and what's happening in the world, but we can be reassured that once we're on the path to a change, that path grows rapidly and then exponential curves go. So I think what we're hopefully doing, if nothing else in Deep Green, it's a very visible manifestation of hope, a hopeful solution, reciprocity built into the business model. That's hopefully, if nothing else, is a guide and a flag for other people to kind of rally around.
Wonderful. And on behalf of Schneider Electric, I just want to take this opportunity to thank you for joining me here today and sharing your insight and valuable comments about what the future of our industry and the ecosystem and how it plays within it is going to play out. So thank you for joining us, Mark.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.